Can you master resilience? Can you choose resilience even in the middle of tragedy? Even in the middle of the hardest times of your life, can you choose to be resilient? I believe the answer is yes. I'm going to tell you some about my story, and I'm going to talk about some techniques that you can use to help you to learn how to be resilient through your life, whether you are going through deep tragedy or you want to be more resilient on a day to day basis. When I was 16 years old, I moved out of home. My dad was my best friend. He had adopted me when I was just one, and he went missing. Some things happened. He was not having a great time. He went missing. I took my then 13-year-old brother to my house. We camped out at mine, and I got a call at 3 o'clock in the morning saying, "Come home. You need to come home right now." I rushed home. I got home. There were police and ambulances all around the close that I had lived in. And I got out of the car and I ran. I broke through, I was a 16-year-old girl. I broke through the arms of three policemen trying to hold me back. And I ran to my house to find my mum with the doctor next to her, all my family behind her. She was sat on the sofa. Everyone else was behind her on the sofa. And I was told, "Daddy's dead." And I crumbled. It killed me off. I had a very, very difficult few years. But I came back after that. And during those times in my formative years, when I was still learning how to even survive as a human being and heal from the things that had made me leave home when I was 16 years old, I was then suddenly faced with huge trauma that I had to cope with by myself. Over the years, I went through lots of therapy, lots of other things happened in that time, and I learned lots about myself, lots about psychology, and I was never angry. I was never angry with my dad. My dad had killed himself. That's what had happened. Now, that's hard to accept. It's hard to move on from. It is the ultimate devastation as a young girl when you've moved out from home and your father is now suddenly gone. But I grew through that. I learned to live with it. I wasn't angry with him. I chose to think about my life in a different way. I chose to look at the situation and I understood that things happen. Unfortunately, I had more of an understanding of that than usual because I had not had an easy childhood. But I understood that things happen, that this wasn't happening to me. It was a thing that happened. It was a thing that happened, if anything, to him. And I learned to live with it. I learned to grow through the years. I did much more therapy. I did lots more learning, much more deep diving into myself, lots of healing. And through the years, several other things happened. I've had a few miscarriages that have been really quite brutal. I've had two abusive relationships since I left home. One was with the father of my eldest child, my firstborn daughter, and one was 12 years later when I mistakenly got into a relationship with someone who had a track history and I didn't know about it. And I was in and out of that relationship relatively fast for an abusive relationship. I was in it and I was out in 20 months. Now, in that time, it caused massive devastation to my life. It caused trauma to my children that they should never have had to deal with. And it caused me a great deal of pain. But again, I understood that this wasn't happening to me. I was not a victim of this. Now, when you've been through abuse, feeling like a victim is a massive part of what you go through. And I never wanted to identify like that. Now, I went to the police. I saw this through. I I was very public about what had happened and who had done it, who had perpetrated it. If you want to see more about that, you can find my TikTok channel and you will see all sorts of details. You'll also see my recovery journey because I documented a lot of how I healed from that and how I came back and how I chose to live, how I chose to be resilient through that. In 2011, my second child, my son, was born. And when he was 8 months old, I went snowboarding. I hadn't been snowboarding since before I was pregnant. I had 1 hour. I was bought tickets for my birthday to go and have an hour on the indoor snow slope near my house. I went snowboarding. Right towards the end, I had a very nasty fall. I hit a patch of ice. I flipped upside down. I hit my head. I hit my head here so hard that it broke my spine in two places. I didn't know this at the time. I got up. And I went and did another run because I thought I've got 5 minutes left and then I'm on mum duty again. And when you have a very small baby, those moments to yourself are a beautiful thing. And this was the first time I had not been with my baby. When I went out, the temperature difference caused massive concussion. Well, it didn't cause it. The temperature difference meant I was experiencing it. So I passed out, felt very drunk immediately, and an ambulance was called. I didn't have time for an ambulance, and I said, I cannot go to hospital. They said, we have to call an ambulance. The ambulance came. By the time the ambulance came, all of the hormones that had been keeping me going in survival mode had worn off. And I didn't feel like I could walk brilliantly, but I managed to walk to the ambulance. By the time the ambulance took me to the hospital, I couldn't walk. They took me in, and I'm still watching the clock thinking, I need to get back to my baby. I need to get back to my children. They're at home. I don't have long. And I was x-rayed, and I was given many tanks of gas and air because I was in a huge amount of pain, which should have been a red herring there for what happened. But they came to see me. They were very solemn, and they told me, you've broken your back in 2 places. We don't know if you're going to walk again. And I laughed. And they asked a psychiatrist to come and see me because they felt like I wasn't taking it seriously. But that's not what was happening. What was happening in me is I heard what they had to say and I did not accept that. And I thought, that's not how my life goes. My life doesn't change now with me being in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. I'm too active. I love life too much. That's not how this goes. They kept me in a hospital and they would come to the ward and talk to me. And after 4 or 5 days, I asked them, if someone brings in my roller skates, can I roller skate around the ward? I was a fully grown adult. I like having fun. And again, they called the psychiatrist. They asked them to come and sit with me to find out why I was saying these things. And they finally understood that I just didn't accept it. And so they brought the physiotherapists in, and I did physiotherapy, and I started to walk, and I was allowed to go home. I went home with a metal brace that I had to keep on for around 6 months, and I was on more drugs, more medication than I think I will ever be on in my whole life ever again. I mean, it was wild. I lost probably 3 or 4 months of my life. I don't remember anything. I don't remember my son's first Christmas. I don't remember anything. So for a while, I was bedbound, and my best friend would come to my house in the morning. She was paid by social services to take care of my baby because I couldn't move out of the bed at first. His father, who I was not in a relationship with, but we were co-parenting, would come to my house in the evening, sleep on River's bedroom floor, and take care of him through the night. I couldn't move. I couldn't walk. And throughout this time, I did not give up on the fact that my life was going to go back to being an exciting, fulfilling life for me. Then I started having seizures. I had my first seizure in my sleep. I think it was the night I came home from hospital, but I don't really know anything about it. And my memory around then is quite sketchy. I then had seizures for 9 years after that accident. I was in brain rehab center as an outpatient for 4.5 years. I couldn't cook anymore. Bear in mind, I moved out of home when I was 16 years old. I was very, very independent. I was a very good cook. I couldn't shop. I couldn't cook. I didn't know how to do these basic skills. I was a bass player. I could no longer play bass. That was gone completely. That's still not back. Although I am now learning to play guitar again because I've realized I'm not going to let this beat me and I'm going to relearn, and that's fine. After 4.5 years, I had worked out ways around it, ways that I could cook. I used flashcards for my cooking, get things in pre-measured amounts. Now it's dead easy. You can get all kinds of food subscriptions where they deliver things to your house, and it's just simple. You have the exact amounts that you need. And that was just coming onto the scene, and that really helped me out. And now through that time, I have then found out that I have extreme ADHD, which makes a lot of sense for the rest of my life. I didn't know this throughout all of this. My best friend of 24 years died of cancer. He moved to America. I would go see him in America. We had friends that we built together over there who I'm still friends with. I still spend much time in America. And I would go out and see him. I would speak to him 20 times a day. on the phone. We were very close. We were friends since we were 16 years, since I was 16 years old. I went through all of my biggest growth, my biggest learning about myself, my biggest learning about the world, I went through with him by my side. We would speak to each other despite him being in America, me being here. I would speak to him about everything. If I watched a movie, I would talk to him about it. If I saw something funny, I would talk to him about it. If I was having a problem, I would talk to him about it. If I was struggling with my mental health, or I had a question about work, or I just wanted to share an exciting thing that happened, I would talk to him about it. And then he got diagnosed with cancer. And very, very soon after that, he was gone. I flew to America. I was with him, with his wife, when he died, and I wouldn't have it any other way, but it was traumatic. And now he's gone, and I don't have him anymore. I have so many reasons to be knocked down, so many times in my life where I could have given up and said, I don't want this anymore. This isn't, I'm clearly not supposed to have a great life. Now, let me tell you something. I'm obsessed with my life. I love my life. I have amazing children who are phenomenal human beings. I have a home that I love. I work as a life coach. I work with people, watching them change their lives, and it is beautiful. I travel the world. I horse ride when I can find time. I climb when I'm not injured, which is fairly often. I love life. I go to music all of the time. Music is a huge part of my life. I go to concerts around the world. I love life. Now, it's been mentioned to me quite a few times that I have a mastery of resilience. And I've been thinking about this for the last few years. And in my work as a life coach, this comes up often with my clients when we're talking about things. And I've realized there are things that work in my brain in a different way to a lot of other people. And here are the things that you can learn. There are things that you can take on board. There are things that they are things that you can master yourself. The first thing, I accept that shit happens. Things happen in life. I believe living this human experience, we are here to experience the good, the bad, and everything in between. I personally believe we made a conscious choice to come here and experience that. But even if I didn't believe that, even if I believed that we were just a random mass of cells having a human life experience, I still would accept that shit happens, that things happen to people. And it doesn't mean it's happening to me. I'm not a victim of this. Things happen, the chance of probability, there are going to be things that happen to me. There are going to be things that happen in my life and around me. And that acceptance and that understanding helps me to then focus on all the great things in my life as well, because I know that as well as terrible things happening and things happening that give me huge contrast in life and allow me to see the things I don't like, amazing things happen as well. Magic happens in life too. Another thing that I've noticed is just a part of the way I think is that I choose where my attention goes. And I talk about this quite a lot in my coaching, and I make videos about it. And maybe it seems like something I talk about quite glibly, but I really don't mean it to. For me, this is part of who I am. It's part of what I have developed through my life and through all of these experiences. I know that regardless of what I'm going through, I can choose how to feel. And I know this causes huge resistance in people, but it is a fact. It is a total fact. In the deepest, darkest times, you can choose what you're thinking about. Another thing that happened to me 6 or 7 years ago, a man came to my home and assaulted me, sexually assaulted me. It went to court. We stood up in court and he got off on a technicality. There was no denying that it had happened, but he got off on a technicality. That's content for another time. But even during that time, I knew that I could choose what I thought about. I knew that I could choose to think about how powerless he had made me feel. I could choose to ache my brain trying to work out how one human being could do that to another human being. But that didn't serve me. That didn't serve me in my day-to-day life. I still had 2 children to raise. I still had work to do. I still had a life that I didn't want to waste. I didn't want to suddenly realize that 10 years of my life had gone by wasted because I was angry at the actions of one human being. Our brains are wired towards negative bias. We look for things that are struggle. We look for things that put us in danger. That's how we're wired. It's natural. It's from millennia ago when we were still cave people and we were coming out and we had to differentiate very quickly between the bright, beautiful thing over here and the pretty, dangerous lion over here. But back then, our fight or flight could be switched on and off depending on when we needed it. And now, in this day and age, in 2024, with our phone notifications and social media and online presence and our 3 or 4 different jobs and the sheer amount of advertising that is pummeled through our brains every day, we are in fight or flight almost all the time. That's our natural state of being as a society now, and you can opt out of that. When you're in that natural state all of the time, it's very difficult to then choose the good thoughts because you're always up there, you're always ramped, you're always ready to go. You can choose to look for the good things in life. You can choose to look for what you're grateful for. When you have a falling out with someone, obsessing over the details of that and obsessing over your anger or your hurt or your pain doesn't change anything. You can do all the things to make the situation right. You can apologize if you need to apologize. You can speak to that other person. You can make sure there's good communication. But when there are other people involved in a situation, there's not a lot you can do. You can control yourself. You can control your own actions and your own thoughts, your own words. You can't control them. So when you have done all of the things, this is the way I think about it. When I have done all of the actionable things to make things better, that's it. I'm not going to obsess over it anymore. And I'm not going to choose to allow my negative thoughts, my angry thoughts, my sad thoughts, my depressed thoughts to take over my life. The other thing that I do on a regular basis, and by regular, I mean sometimes 25 times an hour, sometimes not for several days, but sometimes it is constant. I ask myself, is this helping me or is this harming me? And this is something that I talk about a lot in my coaching. You can put this into practice with anything, with your work environment, with your social environment, with your relationships, with your mindset, with the content you're watching online, with the TV shows that you watch, with the music that you listen to, with the food that you eat. Such a powerful question. Is this helping me or is this harming me? And if it's harming you, make the obvious choice to switch to something that is helping you. Be aware of that and make the choice to switch. I think the most important thing that has allowed me to not only survive a huge amount of tragedy in my life, but I thrive. I love my life. I thrive. And I think the biggest thing that has allowed me to do that is I have an intentional mindset and there is an intentional effort towards where I put my attention, asking myself the question, is this helping me or harming me? My biggest takeaway and my biggest piece of value is to think about those 3 things. And whilst you're thinking about those, keep the idea of intentional life creation in mind. Live intentionally, live with intention. That's my biggest takeaway. That's my one biggest takeaway, actually. Live with intention. Choose what you do, choose who you spend your time with, choose how to feel, choose how to react. Live intentionally because you do have the power to do that. We all do. There is absolutely nothing special about me. Nothing at all. It is all about that mindset. It's all about understanding that shit happens. It's not personal. That's this human life experience we're having. Shit happens. And it's thinking about where to choose to put your attention. Thing number 2. The 3 things that you can learn to master that will make a massive difference to your resilience. Accept that shit happens. This is not personal. This is just the human life experience. It happens, can happen to anyone. Accept that you have the power to choose where to put your thoughts. You have the power to choose where you put your emotional state and what you invest in, what you allow your mind to invest in. Number three, ask yourself, is this helping me or is this harming me? Ask yourself that all the time. And if you don't remember any of those things, remember to live intentionally, to choose your thoughts, to choose your people, to choose your food, to choose the experiences that you have, to choose your responses to the experiences you're not choosing. Resilience is absolutely something that you can learn, it's something you can master, and you don't have to have gone through all of those awful things. You don't have to have had cancer in your life or disability or being made redundant or losing your family. You don't need to have these big things for resilience to make a massive difference to you. Being resilient can mean that when you're in a work meeting and someone says something that you find difficult, you're not affected by it or you're impacted much less. Your day to day life can be made so much easier. Your interactions with other people can be so much easier if you are more resilient in the way you respond to the things that are happening around you. I really hope that something in my story has resonated. And I really hope that you connect with it on some level. And I hope that you can see from my story that you can learn resilience. You can learn these three things and you can absolutely choose to live intentionally.